Like I said, this session is regarding the CCSQ Data and Analytics Vision and Roadmap, to be led by Ken Howard, who's the Director of Division of Engineering Architecture within CCSQ and ISG. So at this point, I'll hand it over to you, Ken, to kick things off for us.
So good afternoon, evening-ish, everyone. If you can go to the next slide. So I want to start my presentation with a little disclaimer. I kind of touched on it this morning, but I want to make sure that everybody takes this in the right context. This is meant as information. If there's any contractual inference, it's not intended. Just to let you know, if there's anything that you feel impacts individual contracts, work, etc., please raise that individually with your core so it can be escalated through the proper channels. I'm not giving any technical direction on this call. I'm giving merely insight, information, and basically general philosophies of the direction that we're going to be going within CCSQ. Again, informational. So the legal disclaimer is done. Touching on our agenda here is I want to give you that insight, that philosophy, that strategic approach that we're going to be doing with things. I want to give you some active improvements. Then when I say that, are relatively short-term efforts that we're doing to provide a better analytic environment and data environment for everyone. Give you some insight to our pilot and pilot strategies that we're going to be doing in the future, current and future, and the data alignment, right? So I think the CCSQ data scientist touched on this a little bit. So we're going to build on this data alignment, some efforts that we're going to be doing in the future to help the quality of the data that is underlying in our environment. So next slide, please. So some of you have probably heard, if not the majority, you've always heard the philosophy of bring the people to the data. That has been shared at multiple occasions, both individual and group settings. And what that means is, previous to the existence of the CDR, there was really no central place to get data. Every project team was left to their own devices to go get data on their own to solve their own use cases. There was little to no insight. So CCSQ is adopting a philosophy in order to strengthen our understanding of our own data, of how our data is used, leveraged, and produces its outcomes, right? Is that we want to see people actually, the efforts in processing and analytics done on the data, to find out what gaps there are in the data, and to help bring about the improvements to it. The insight into that, right, is what that leads to, is gives us better quantitative, qualitative, and basically, I think as Noah pointed out in his presentation, the better quality of data that we can provision. We can work with those business owners, those data owners, and build much better and robust data sets for analytics to be done. Give us insight into who and how our data is being used, right? Not just that the deliverable was met, but how that deliverable is being used by the downstream consumers, how it is being acted upon within CMS to improve our quality programs, et cetera, right? So that's the general philosophy that we're trying to improve, get that insight, get that understanding of the total data usage for our environment. So again, we can see gaps, we can move towards improving that. And then what is somewhat more important is understanding in that consumption of data, measuring what is and is not valuable. So we know what is a higher priority to focus on to improve the quality versus the lower priority efforts, right? Data sets that are used by large amounts of people that have greater outcome improvements from them, leading to program improvements, should always get a higher priority. But addressing them individually, project by project, it doesn't always give us, from a CDR perspective, a clear insight. So we are setting up capabilities with the bring people to data in order to kind of see how the data is being used to establish those metrics. So next slide, please. So one of the active things, again, our internal is I think, again, the data scientist pointed out, you could solve any problem you wanted as long as you use SAS, right? So what we want to do is bring better tools to our toolbox. That is really the direction that we're trying to come to. So in that, here are some major areas. This is not all inclusive. These are just big ticket items to let everybody know. Is in major activities, the data catalog improvements. So right now, every line of business, every quality center produces its own data output, right, based on their own systems and their own business requirements, and creates their own set of data, catalog in the documentation. It varies system to system. Linking data from one program to another can be extremely difficult and challenging. So we are actively working on something so simple as standardizing some of the data catalog templates, how we document the metadata, everything that we capture as part of the underlying data structure. So we can get the better definitions to that data, right? See where there's weakness, see where there's improvement opportunities, and see what's strong so we can share those strengths with other programs and other lines of business to improve the quality of their data. So again, the intent there is to make our data more robust in the long run and to provide cross-compatibility for multi-program level analytics. This is something that was touched on in the Databricks. In our pilot, and I'll expand on this in the next section, one of the fundamental requirements that we were looking for, lessons learned from our current analytic environment, was around personal compute, right? So with the architecture infrastructure that we're currently running, it's a pretty non-scalable environment that any single individual with a rogue query can bring the environment down, right? It doesn't happen often, but it happens often enough that people notice, right? So there are situations to where a large deliverable by one program can impact the ability for another program to deliver their output that they're looking for. We wanted to alleviate that as much as possible, get as close to personal compute, not team compute, not contract compute, but personal, right? So when you spin up and run your analytics, you'll have a cluster of resources available to achieve your goal. So with that, we recently did the pilot. The requirements that we used on that pilot were standardized modern analytic languages, notebook-based approach, no more contending with resources, right? The configuration is dynamic. You'd scale up to a set size cluster if you need to, and the cluster would deallocate when you're no longer running anything. All that were requirements that we used for the pilot that we just concluded. CAP CDR metrics, again, as I touched previously in our philosophy, is one thing we get a lot of is job failures. We get information on when something goes wrong, but we don't necessarily share and transparent about the total number of jobs. We want to get better at our transparency and showing you the percents of failures, the total jobs run, length of average jobs, any number of metrics that we think we can gather and share with the community. We want to get better at that level of transparency. You should see the total information on the analytic environment. This is something, all these efforts are things that we are actively working on now. We're hoping to deliver in the next, let's say, 90 to 100 days. Data authorization. We are currently working towards building a portal that will allow us will allow you to authorize others to see a data set you created, to cross-share and publish data sets and share it with the right community so they can also use it as a reference data set going forward for whatever programmatic analytics that you are doing. Access to the right data by the right people is obviously the challenge here, is making sure we're not being too broad with who can see what data, because a lot of our data is either DUA based, contractually sensitive, or needs to be restricted to individuals or organizations. So this is the challenge there that we are currently going through and identifying. This is coming to a portal near you in the near future. Next slide, please. Another thing with the bring the people to the data philosophy is we are setting up both monitoring and reporting of data loss prevention. We want to see what data is moving in and out of our environment. We want to understand the usage of our data much better. So these are efforts that we're doing to get a good, robust monitoring and auditing capabilities about where data is going in our environment and who's using what. Natural language processing is a growing service. Again, I'll touch on this a little later in the presentation, but we are trying to grow our natural language processing or NLP capabilities within our architecture, another tool in the toolbox that we will be able to expand out to as an enterprise service. This is coming soon and in the near future. And we're hoping to give multiple solutions to these type of functionality. So NLP, we currently have a pilot system called FAS that is going to be available in the future. We may have other options as well, depending on what type of data you need to do this type of analytics on. Data visualization, as it was touched on, QuickSight is another tool in our toolbox. Instead of exporting that Excel spreadsheet or PDF or Word document or whatever the case may be that's being exported from an analytics medium, or it might be something that can dynamically be generated by QuickSight, and presented. It's just another way of getting data to the right community here. So depending on your use case, we'd be interested in hearing from this entire community on how best all these tools can be used to look at how we deliver that content to your user community, because each one of you has a different and slightly different user community here. So we're interested in hearing about your business cases, your deliverables, and how and who consumes them. Next slide, please. So the most interesting part of this presentation to me is this subject, pilots. I love it. I'm a technologist. I love new toys in the sandbox. And this is where this comes in. Next slide. So going through all of the major initiatives that we have, and this is, again, not all inclusive. It's meant to be kind of guiding principles. We look for your input on pilot candidates, things that you use in your professional world, you see in your professional world that you think would be of value to help your programs, right, to help your deliverables. The first and foremost, again, as touched, is the next step from improving our current data documentation is an actual usage of a data catalog that will allow, metadata searches and clarification of documentation. We are partnering with OIT. We are partnering with CMCS on evaluation of data catalog products. We had already partnered with OIT on their evaluation of the Edmondson data catalog service. They're doing an Elation catalog evaluation, and we are considering evaluating our own tool within ISG to make sure it fits our quality team, all our quality programs requirements here. So this is an active pilot that we're going to be bringing up. And evaluating this use case, first partnering with those external entities, OIT, CMCS, to make sure we're leveraging their pilots, their successes, their pro cons in our evaluation of how we can apply it to our world, what it means to quality. PII and PHI detection, again, it's kind of a mandate. We need to make sure the right people see the right data. I see my screen frozen. Can you hear me okay still?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my screen froze. So to make sure the right people see the right data. So we want to get some automation or semi-automatic ways of detecting PII or PHI when a data set is published to make sure we don't let this type of data out to the wrong community. Again, with the use of QuickSight, we could open up the wrong data to a very large swath of people very quickly. It can be accidentally embedded within a CSV or some other data that it wasn't meant to. We want to be able to do better at detecting these type of situations and basically give you the "are you sure" option with the distribution of this type of data. To make sure that content didn't need to be scrubbed, filtered, whatever the case may be, de-identified if necessary. Again, this will all be based off of your own individual business requirements, but the service itself will be at the enterprise level. The pilot that was very heavily talked about today was so the presentation was with Databricks today. We also evaluated a SageMaker EMR in parallel with that SageMaker pilot. Again, we did not want to have a one solution. We wanted to truly evaluate and apply real world analytic solutions to see which one responded, what the administrative overhead was to maintain the platform, et cetera, on that pilot. It was kind of the prototype for how we're moving forward with evaluating technologies and bringing new tools into our toolbox. Is we want to make sure we're consistent in applying real world use cases, and hopefully we get partnerships with everyone on this call about evaluating new tools in the future. Is that we can see, does this tool fit multiple use cases, multiple scenarios? It makes it much easier to justify and warrant it becoming an enterprise solution for our total analytic community. But the multi-notebook capability, we did pretty robust testing between Databricks and SageMaker EMR, and the decision, we are moving forward with one of them. As an enterprise service, I want to be very clear about that. It doesn't mean the other one won't still be a tool in our toolbox. It will not be at an enterprise level. It'll be used for specific case studies, specific use cases, and specific analytic requirements if needed. If plan A doesn't work, we can apply plan B. So with this kind of a notebook approach, it brings some modern development languages into our capabilities. It allows a little diversity in our coding. Some individuals strong in one versus another language. It allows some variability while achieving the same end results. I also like the fact that applying our code to peer, not necessarily peer review, but sharing. So reusability and logic on how we query certain attributes within our data can be cross-shared between components, via GitHub, via Community of Excellence, between any number of models we could apply here, is also part of the evaluation of this, to apply a little bit of governance and oversight to how we share information, how we share queries. If we do an analytic effort and someone found a good way of querying a certain information out of a data set, we want that publicized. There's no reason to reinvent it. It's something that could be shared between multiple programs and multiple projects. More to come on that in the future. So SaaS to non-SaaS, that's probably not 100% accurate. SaaS is currently a tool in our toolbox. It will remain a tool in our toolbox. We plan to expand the non-SaaS world. Currently, we have Zeppelin in our toolbox. It is not a performant or reliable platform. It is a black eye to my world, and I want to make sure that was a huge lessons learned to not repeat that. It was just put in as an alternate solution. There was not a lot of robust testing put around it, and it did what you would expect it to do. It failed. So we are moving forward with that as a lesson, as in getting to a proper way of evaluating any technologies. That key, it works in our environment. So as most of you know, federal regulations, federal rules, federal application of TRA and ARS for development of all of our services, FedRAMP, ATO, FISMA certification, all this is HSPD 12. All these are requirements of any service that comes in. When you apply those particular rules and regulations and laws to any system that is stood up, it breaks a lot of times. And we want to make sure we rule all that out before we bring a service into our environment up front, instead of after we already choose the product and implement it. So we're going down these pilot standards in order to affect that, to affect all the qualifications of those requirements that the tool we do end up going with. The tools, plural, that we evaluate all can or cannot meet that level of standard before we choose it. Again, a lot of times a tool that works on somebody's laptop doesn't necessarily work as efficiently as an enterprise service. So that is a major consideration going forward. Next slide, please. Future alignment. So this is something that's important. It comes up weekly. right? So one team or another is saying, what about this? They do that, right? There's cross-reference. You're not the IDR, et cetera, et cetera. It comes up on a routine basis. So just to let you know, there are alignment opportunities going on at the CMS level. So CMS claims, they are looking at taking the NCH, MQA, MQR, and making it as an enterprise, a CMS enterprise offering. The second that is available, we will have a migration path leveraging those claims. We in the CDR don't want to house claims. We are not the claims owner. We are consuming it from the system owner through NCH and et cetera feeds. We want to point to the system of record, the authoritative source for this type of information. So again, everyone doing evaluation on claims is working from the same transformed or available data set. That way, there's no transformation issues with data sets. The more you move it downstream, as everybody knows, the more you touch data, the more likely you're going to introduce some issues with that underlying data. We want to move that more upstream and get it as accurate to the source as possible. Part C claims, we've had numerous requests for Part C claims. There's an active effort to secure Part C claims. It is being addressed at the CCSQ level, and we're trying our best to get that level of data, that data set into and or available to the CDR. IDR in the cloud, again, it comes up all the time, is this information is in the IDR, it isn't in the CDR. The IDR is actively working on an IDR in the cloud migration. Currently, they're using Snowflake technologies from the best of my understandings. Once that is available, we plan to work with the IDR to integrate and make that source available. There's, of course, I don't know if there's cost impacts. I don't know if there's contractual limitations, if there's DUA impacts to that. All that needs to be resolved is what my particular hesitation is. But the physical access, when it's available, my analytics team will be looking at finding out what we need to do to integrate with that particular data source as well. Program data, as again, the data scientists called out, the quality of our data is variable at best, to be kind, is that we want to align and get more and more of the program data available in the CDR and as close to real time as we can get. That's rarely going to be 100% real time, as some programs, are bi-yearly programs. They just don't have a lot of updates outside of certain cycles. So real time could be within the past 6 months for that program, as for instance. So we are working actively with every major line of business. So to get that data available to the CDR, if you need access to something, ask the team. Most of these major data sets require DUA update to get access to it, which gets approved by your cores, et cetera. And then we grant access to the underlying data set that we have. This is improving more and more. iKeys, as they migrate more provider types into iKeys from the legacy system, they're adding more and more to their MDS. That data gets added as it's made available as they migrate that information. Same with EQRS, they're bringing that data over. We're trying to expand and clarify that all the data needed for analytics to be done is made available to the community that requires access to that data. And again, HQR has been there a while. QMARS has been there for a while, and some other data, I think, Part C plans have been there. So we also provide access to external program data. Benny in the cloud is one option, and some other, I think MDM touched on some other data sets that we can kind of forward connectivity to or assist with getting connectivity to this data, so you can join the necessary tables to get the analytic capabilities that you need. And lastly on this is the portal application. Again, it was touched on, you saw it initially as an auth portal. What this is really going to be is an analytic portal. It's going to be the landing spot for all things analytic within CCSQ. So this will be where you'll come in to get the QuickSight. You will come in to see dashboards. You get access requests. You can request access to data sets that you know of, that you were told of, that you'll see a catalog entry, right? That you'll be able to say, I need access to this, and we'll do a workflow to get the necessary people to approve your access to it. We'll give you a reference if you need to go and get a DUA modification. Things like that are what we're looking at. We're working on right now and defining what that portal looks like. But the first step will be the access control part of it, because in order for us to improve broad access to data, we need people to be able to request access to that data. So look for information around this. We may do surveys to see if we're on the right track. We may do pilots to evaluate and get feedback. It's purely voluntary. There is no mandate for your participation in these. It's merely providing your input to get the best value to this community. Because you would be the consumers of this. You would be the ones that would get the most value out of this in order to move this forward. So again, completely elective, but I would encourage your involvement at least in any surveys that come out. Next slide, please. Current technologies, just as a quick summary, and I seem to be moving through this pretty quicker than I thought I would. So I just felt there was a few quick points that I wanted to get. It comes up, we currently are running SAS VIA 3.5. If you're not using it in our environment, it is CCSQ's current plan to remain on that platform, the 3.5 platform. So there is no plans for us to move to the 4X platform as of today. Not that doesn't change, but with the current approach, what we're doing, this is the platform we'll be on for the foreseeable future, unless we come back and revisit. Zeppelin, again, from the experience with Zeppelin, this was the main driver for moving to an alternative, a non-SAS analytic platform, right? Another tool in the toolbox, in that we need a stable, scalable platform. Zeppelin proved that right out of the gate, is that any significant analytics got variable response, if not failure, with the performance of it. So we want to make sure that there was an interest in the product, but being that it was performant, we could never scale it out to the enterprise. There were security vulnerabilities with the product that were not able to be resolved, that limited the ability to deploy it. So all these lessons were taken in with the product evaluation that we just went through. AWS QuickSight, again, the way we present data to our community, this really opened up, before AWS QuickSight, it was very limited. It was, there were a few Tableau users out there. There were a few SAS data visual analytics out there. But there was no wide adoption for data visualization in any way, shape, or form. So in expanding the need during COVID, dashboarding information to the right communities, AWS QuickSight was stood up and is now an available tool in our toolbox. So if this type of dashboarding, again, instead of Excel spreadsheets, instead of PDFs, instead of Word documents, if there's, something that you all want to talk to as QuickSight being an option, we would love to get that request and to sit down with you and see, is this something that fits the model that you're thinking? So we can make sure we're giving you the right tool. All I ask is you come to us with the business need, with the description of what you're trying to do. Let's not come with just one solution. Let's look at what tools we do have available to us and solve your business need and make it a conversation. Another tool that has recently come up in about the past year was the feedback analysis system, right? It's an NLP product, natural language processing. Right now, it's a pretty closed audience using the tool, but we're looking at expanding it as an option if you do have any natural language processing needs. Look for information on that in the near future and the expandability of it. I believe they are doing a session tomorrow, Rachel?
That is correct.
Okay, so look for that session. It'll be very informative. That team is very energized and looking to mature this product going forward. Next slide, please. So that was, I thought I had one more slide. So if there's any questions, I think I saw.
Yeah, there was one question so far, and if there are more, feel free to put them in the chat. But the one question was, will the portal application use HARP entitlements and the security officer approval process or something new?
So that is a really great question. So I think that is what we are trying to determine right now is what level of granularity we're getting to. So HARP entitlement typically is at a coarse grain level, right? So you as a representative of an organization can grant access to some application. So with the issue with data is that it's not necessarily at just an organizational level. It is one organization granting it to another. So we're trying to figure out what that model looks like and how we will apply it, because one workflow may trigger another to get the approval, right? Do you have permission to share that data in the first place? Has to be evaluated. And does the person you're saying can have access to it have permission to see it in the second place? So we are evaluating that type of relationship with the data. And of course, it depends on the type of data that was published in the first place. So it's a great question that I don't know. I'm thinking because of that scenario, HARP will not be applied universally to this. But it could be used as workflow engines or any number of supporting factors, but that kind of invisible architecture, not necessarily the upfront entitlement like it is to request an application role through HARP today. I
Great,
hope that
thank
answered
you,
your
Ken.
question. Yeah.
I'm not seeing any other questions. Ken, did you have anything else you wanted to say, or was that it?
I do not. So it does give another minute, but if there's any more questions, if anybody has any, recommendations after this call, any pilot recommendations, any services you think, again, remember, we are moving towards come to the data, right? So if there is functionality, features to consider, we want your feedback. We want to hear your business case. What's your, the what data you need, right? Is there a data gap? What processing you need to accomplish your deliverable, what audience you need to deliver to, what you're delivering to make sure we're using the right tools to meet your business objective. So all this information is very helpful to make sure we have the right tools for the job here.
It looks like a question just came in the chat, Ken. Let me read that really quick. The person asked, there has been a significant amount of info about adding tools to the CDR ecosystem. What are current efforts to improve CMS administrative data architecture? For example, better ways to subset claims by beneficiary over long periods of time. In the current Hive architecture, performance is fine when leveraging the claim through date partition, but often we need to subset claims by beneficiary provider in addition to time.
So if you're talking about the high performance metrics, so that again, that's one of the drive, the Embari kind of cluster that we have in place is a fixed set. So the more complex you got, the more resources it's going to set up to use that. So with an architecture, the requirement that we had with architecture going forward was to not have that limitation, to allow scaling to take place as the analytic demand increased, right? And to scale back as analytic demand decreased. So I'm thinking from a performance profile, we're going to knock it out of the park when it comes to that type. So your specific join that you're mentioning here, I can't really speak to in that partitioning. But the data as it's identified today is 9 times out of 10, you either have access to the underlying data set or you don't, right? We don't do any really specific subset partitioning of the data itself. So those filters, the analytics, those joins have to be done by you individually, as we don't do extracts, we don't do abstracted or ETL level claims data. That would be up to you. But again, if we see a broad community need for something, that's that backlog item I was talking about. Maybe it's a consideration for an improvement that we can, do some type of ETL. We can do some type of data set generation if there is a broad enough demand on it. I hope that answered your question.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ken. All right, that seems to have answered the question. Great. All right, and again, I just want to plug, I know we mentioned QuickSight and the feedback analysis system. And again, there are 2 sessions tomorrow, one to cover each. The QuickSight one will be at 1 p.m. Eastern, and then the feedback analysis system overview will be at 3 o'clock. But at this time, I just want to give you guys a reminder that day 2 begins tomorrow at 12 p.m. We're going to be having a session on understanding the CCSQ data and analytics environment. And we will have, I think, 5 sessions in total tomorrow. So a lot of sessions. So, well, thank you all for coming today, and special thanks to our speakers for getting this information together. It's been very informational, very informative. So, thank you all, and I hope you have a great evening. I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.
Have a good evening.